In 12 months, one industry produced The Matrix, Fight Club, The Sixth Sense, American Beauty, Magnolia, Being John Malkovich, Office Space, and The Iron Giant, just to name a few. Major studios were giving major money to weird movies, and it was awesome. You know what I'm talking about. Back before the suits screwed it all up with corporate slop. Back when movies were good.
Fuck what you know. You need to forget about what you know. That's your
What if
problem.
I told you that amazing years like 1999 were just part of the same cycle Hollywood and movies has been stuck in for almost 100 years? And every time the system burns itself out, people cry, "Cinema is dead." But there's always something oddly beautiful waiting right on the other side.
I like that.
So if you've been depressed about the state of the industry, I get it, because the people who say movies are dead are very convincing. They always have been. I mean, you just have to look around. You see Star Wars 12, the 14th Marvel spin-off that makes you feel like you have to go do forced homework or something. It's this sort of collective creeping boredom with what's coming out. And it isn't just a modern streaming Gen Z attention span problem. It's just the predictable low point of a pattern that I want to show you how to recognize. But to really understand how we get out of it, we have to go back to 1945 or so, back when 6 companies owned the entire pipeline. Real quick before we jump in here, this video is a reaction to people saying that cinema is dead and movies are dead, because people say that all the time. So I went back and looked at the history, and that turned into this. I did not mean for it to be this long, but there was a lot of things I didn't know. So what this is not, is it is not a list of the best movies ever made, so your favorite is probably not in here. I'm so sorry. What this is a timeline of all the times that Hollywood was completely beyond repair, and then how they repaired it, which is why I'm calling this movie The Rise and Fall and... To understand the cycle, it's helpful to know where it all started. And most people don't know this, but at its peak, Hollywood didn't just make movies, it owned the entire pipeline. The studios owned the writers under 7-year contracts at wages the studio set. They owned the actors the same way, they owned the cameras, the sound stages, the editing bays, but, and here's the odd one, they owned the actual movie theaters too. Paramount had its own chain, Warner Bros. Had its own, MGM, RKO, Fox, all of them owned theaters, and every single step from page to camera to the seat in the theater was controlled by 6 companies. If you were an independent filmmaker with an original idea in 1945, you had no path to an audience. The studio made it, distributed it, and decided whether anyone ever saw it. And if you don't believe me, just ask Orson Welles. He caught a huge break, and at 26 got handed more creative freedom than almost any director in Hollywood history, and made what many people consider the greatest film ever. And then had to watch as the studio buried it, limited its distribution, and while he was filming the follow-up in Brazil, they cut 50 minutes they didn't like from that print and burned the footage so he couldn't put it back in the film. Not because it was bad, but because it made them uncomfortable. This is what studio control actually looked like at full power. And now here's what I want you to watch for as we go through this. Every time the machine breaks down, and it breaks down like clockwork, the same things appear right before it happens. And I want you to see them for yourself, because by the time we get to the end, I think you're going to recognize every single one.
You must remember this, a kiss is just a kiss.
Gone with the Wind, Casablanca, Singing in the Rain, Ben-Hur, Vertigo, Sunset Boulevard. The Dream Factory was not a cynical name. The machine actually worked. It housed directors and writers and actors in a well-funded, structured, stable environment and got world-class cinema out the other side, consistently, for decades. But while the Dream Factory is running at full power, something arrives in American living rooms that scares the studios to death. Television. In 1946, 90 million Americans go to the movies every single week. But by 1969, that number is 17 million. Television doesn't compete with cinema, it dismantles the habit of going. And the studio's first instinct, and this will sound very familiar, is not to adapt, it's to fight. Several major studios refused to license their films for broadcast, and many lobbied Congress against the boob tube. But when lawyers failed, they did the only thing they knew how to do: make it bigger. If television can put an ordinary film in your living room for free, well, we'll make them so big that a little box can't contain them. Enter the widescreen format, 4-hour runtimes, the intermission, cinemas as event rather than habit, and for a moment, it really works. 1965, The Sound of Music, an $8 million budget, generates $285 million at the box office. Adjusted for inflation, it is the 6th highest grossing film in the history of cinema. And now, if you're a studio executive watching this happen, what lesson do you take away from it? Maybe Julie Andrews is a once-in-a-generation talent, Robert Wise directed it with craft and precision, the specific story connected with a specific audience at a specific cultural moment. Nope. The lesson they walked away with was that audiences love expensive musicals. So like any self-respecting business owner, they created a template, funded it well, scaled it, and made infinite cash. Sort of. Watch what happens next. Fox immediately greenlights 3 enormous musicals. Dr. Dolittle, $17 million budget, one of the most expensive films ever produced at that point, and they lose $10 million, more than half of what they spent, they lose. Star, Julie Andrews, and the same director as The Sound of Music, that ought to do the trick, but they still lose $10 million. Hello Dolly, Barbra Streisand, $24 million budget, the studio only makes 15 after theaters take their cut. And this is happening on top of Cleopatra, a historical epic Fox had already made in '63 for $44 million. It's the #1 movie of the year, but doesn't even come close to making enough money back to stop the bleeding. Fox is now so broke that they have to sell their production lot. That lot is in West Los Angeles, and they sell it to real estate developers who build offices and luxury condos and an upscale shopping mall, and they call it Century City. If you've ever driven through Century City, the towers, the mall, the fountains, you are driving through the physical ruins of a studio that bet everything on the wrong lesson from The Sound of Music.
Here is the perfect motion picture that touches every note.
But the financial collapse was really only half the problem. It's 1967, the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement are on television every night. Real, raw, chaotic American life broadcast directly into living rooms. And inside the theaters, Hollywood is still releasing movies about boats full of nuns.
Pray the song I sing will some simple pleasure bring, that the world shall know his
You see, everything the
name.
studios made had to pass through something called the Hays Code. This was a production rulebook they enforced on themselves from 34 till 68. It said no real violence, no moral ambiguity, no profanity, no sexuality, and criminals, importantly, must be punished, and good must triumph. And the disconnect became almost surreal.
Shall always be. Though I'm poor, said Dominique, as he spoke unto the Lord, I will be your humble servant and your
People left cinemas and the box office dropped, and as the box office dropped, studios played it safer, and so the box office dropped even further. But while the juggernaut of Golden Age Hollywood proper was losing its mind, and most of its money, something else was happening. The weird ones were waiting in the wings for a chance. Film students with names like Coppola, Scorsese, Lucas, De Palma, and even Spielberg. And they had spent the last few years looking across the Atlantic to France, Sweden, Italy, and Japan. They watched Godard, Truffaut, Bergman, and Kurosawa make raw, uncomfortable, deeply honest films about moral failure and human despair. Films, importantly, with no rules. And the weird ones realized something aging studio execs couldn't see from their offices. That chaos was the material. They just needed the machine to get desperate enough to let them try. And eventually, it did. In 1967, 2 films come out that break the formula completely. The Graduate, a $3 million budget, about a young man sleeping with his girlfriend's mother and running from every single thing that the adult world is trying to hand him, makes $104 million at the box office. Then Bonnie and Clyde, violence American cinema had never shown before. An ending that left audiences feeling genuinely ambushed, $2.5 million budget, $22 million.
I'm gonna tear them apart. Those punks.
Easy Rider, 1969, Peter Fonda and Jack Nicholson on motorcycles, nobody winning, America depicted as a place that destroys the things it claims to love. And that movie, which cost $375,000, turns into $50 million. And that number travels through every studio in Hollywood like an electric current. And for the first time in the history of the industry, the studios open the gate and let the outsiders in. This is definitely not the end of the story, but let's enjoy it for a second. The Godfather, 1972, Francis Ford Coppola, who Paramount executives had so little faith in, they almost fired him during production. $6 million budget, the film becomes the highest-grossing movie in the history of cinema at that point, adjusted for inflation. Chinatown, Taxi Driver, American Graffiti, Annie Hall, Apocalypse Now, Rocky, which Sylvester Stallone wrote himself and refused to sell unless he could star in it, which was patently insane at the time, made $225 million on a $1 million budget. The executives were right to open the gate. The machine, when it stopped controlling everything, churned out better product. And before we really unpack this heyday and what happens, I just gotta mention this because so many people don't know this, and it's the coolest fact I know about this era. The directors who defined it, Coppola, Scorsese, Lucas, they were friends. Different film schools, but they found each other. They watched the same European films, argued the same ideas, red-penned each other's scripts, and became what critics would call the movie brats. They were basically the original Letterboxd bros. And two of them, Spielberg and Lucas, specifically, were about to make films so amazing that without meaning to, they were going to hand the executives the economic argument that would end the magic yet again. Because the end begins, as it usually does, with massive success. It's 1975, and 26-year-old Spielberg is in over his head on the Atlantic Ocean, where his mechanical shark keeps breaking. He's months over schedule, millions over budget, and by the time Jaws is finished, it has cost $9 million, which was triple the original plan. And it becomes the first film in history to gross $100 million domestically. But the number isn't actually the important part. What's important is how Universal released it. At a shopping mall near you. You see, before Jaws, a film opened in a handful of cities, built an audience through word of mouth and reviews, and expanded only if it caught on. It was like an organic process. But with Jaws, Universal bet big. What if they skipped the slow build-up, launched an aggressive TV campaign, and opened the film simultaneously in 464 fancy new multiplexes right next to the food court on date night in America?
It has already made more money than any motion picture in history. Jaws has made sharks popular.
The film was everywhere before anyone saw it, and it made hundreds of millions of dollars. And the executives gave this template a new name, wide release, and it worked like gangbusters. I know this sounds like boring distribution technicalities, but it's not. See, if you're going to release a movie to everybody, that movie needs to work for everybody. That means less rough edges, less moral ambiguity, less weird stuff. A little like the Hays Code, actually, come to think of it. And then 2 years later, George Lucas. $11 million budget, $775 million worldwide.
The movie is called Star Wars, and since it opened here, capacity crowds have filled the 1,100 seats in the theater almost daily.
A completely original sci-fi epic. It took the nation by storm, making just more money than anyone ever thought was possible with a single movie. And it's an amazing movie to boot. This was not a cash grab. This was an inspired piece of art that deserves all the money it's ever made, and the studio executives can't help but learn the wrong lesson again, and it's a familiar one.
That'd be so stupid.
They should make bigger movies. You see, for a little while now, Hollywood's risk had been diversified. If a small movie bombed, it didn't break the studio, but on the back of Star Wars, the math changed again. And so, to protect their cash, over the next few years, the studio industry quietly built 4 mechanisms designed to guarantee success. Number 1, wide release. No rough edges, less weird stuff, general appeal, good for date night, preferably with popcorn. Mechanism 2, budget increases.
Production value!
More money, more toys, more shoot days. Coppola gets $31 million for Apocalypse Now. He films his own breakdown during the production. The machine is getting heavier. With studios spending more and more, they want data to ensure their investment. They show rough cuts to audience panels. If the ending is too ambiguous, the score drops. If the protagonist is too morally complicated, the score drops. You fix it, and hey look, the score went up. And last, but certainly not least, imagine Hitchcock pitching Vertigo 2. What about Singing in the Rain 2? No, Episodes are for television. A film, you make it once. It says what it says. But if a film is a proof of concept for McDonald's toys, well, you make it forever. Rocky comes back. The shark comes back. The new incentive is to never actually fully end a story. And by 1980, the executives were sure they had cracked the code and they were itching to take control back from the hotshot directors. And then finally one day, someone gave them a reason. The film was called Heaven's Gate, and Michael Cimino had just won Best Director for his previous film, The Deer Hunter, so United Artists, one of the founding studios of Hollywood, handed him a Western epic with essentially no creative guardrails. His original work print ran 5.5 hours. The production was so far over schedule that the budget hit $44 million, the most expensive American film ever made at that point, and it grossed $3.5 million. And just like that, United Artists, one of the founding studios of Hollywood, ceased to exist because of one movie. And every executive in America looked at that number and said the same thing. This is what happens when you let directors do what they want. And look, I want to be super, super clear about something. The executives are very rarely actually wrong. The data's all there in a spreadsheet. The thing is that what they took away was wildly incomplete. It was like reductive. The point is this. Studio executives learn the wrong lesson from successes and from failures, and each time they learn the wrong lesson, they use that as an excuse to take away creative control from the actual filmmakers. So we could say it this way: success makes them greedy, but failure makes them tyrannical, which is kind of worse. These 4 mechanisms are now the operating system of Hollywood, and for the next 20 years, you'll never believe it, they work. Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, Die Hard, The Terminator, Jurassic Park. That is not cynical corporate slop. Those are films people watch 50 times. Films you put on when you're sick, you show your kids. This era produces some of the most purely entertaining, technically accomplished, genuinely awesome films in history. Studios keep hiring Spielberg to make Spielberg films, Lucas to make Lucas films, Zemeckis to make Zemeckis films, and they all rock. But because the studios become completely addicted to these massive, sure-bet cash cows, the industry starts to taper yet again. The strange fringe movies of just a decade earlier really do kind of dry up. They're just not making them anymore because the blockbusters are working so well. A blank check if you are already a legend, but a locked door if you were trying to break in. And while the room is getting smaller, something arrives from the outside that the studios do not see coming. Or to be more technically accurate, it's something they definitely see coming, correctly identify as a threat, and then fail to stop anyway. The VHS cassette.
Come on, we'll be late.
Hang on a minute, I'm just setting the VCR.
Wouldn't it be nice to have a machine to record television programs you'd otherwise miss?
Now you can automatically videotape your favorite show even when you're not home and watch.
In 1982, Jack Valenti, the head of the MPAA at the time, goes before Congress to argue that the VCR was as dangerous to movie producers as the Boston Strangler was to women home alone. He compared the technology to a literal serial killer. And let's be crystal clear here, they didn't want it regulated or taxed. They wanted it completely full-blown illegal to own or to use. The case ballooned all the way to the Supreme Court, with Disney and Universal suing Sony in what would be called Betamax rulings. And then, in stepped a pastor from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Hey, neighbor. I'm glad we're together again today.
Mr. Fred Rogers. He testified, saying that he personally welcomed families to record his show. Here's his exact quote, because it's kind of beautiful.
I just feel that anything that allows a person to be more active in the control of his or her life in a healthy way is important.
And in 1984, the Supreme Court sided with him. Studio execs lost the case 5-4 by one vote. The ruling said that recording for personal use was completely legal, and very importantly, standing right next to this ruling was an existing federal law called the First Sales Doctrine. It meant that once a studio sold a VHS to a retailer, that retailer could rent it to consumers as many times as they want without paying the studio a single additional dollar. The studios tried to strangle the VCR, and instead, they handed the rental market a totally new business model. And here's where the story turns, again. Video rental stores open everywhere. Mom and pop operations, strip mall locations, eventually chains, and they all have the same problem. The studios are only making about a dozen major movies a year, and that is nowhere near enough to fill all of those shelves. So now these stores need volume. And they'll take a chance on a $200,000 film with no stars that a major studio would just throw in the trash because it costs almost nothing and it fills a slot on the wall. And there it is again. Hollywood declares war on something new and loses. But in this case, the technology they were trying to kill accidentally creates the biggest demand for independently made cinema in the entire history of the medium. And suddenly, the weird ones have the side door to Hollywood completely blown off its hinges. There's a video rental store in Manhattan Beach, California called Video Archives. You probably know where this is going. The staff arranged the films not alphabetically, but by director, by taste, by argument. And one of the people behind the counter in the mid-'80s is a 20-something with no film school degree, no industry connections, no path to Hollywood through any conventional door. And his name is Quentin Tarantino.
Let's walk inside my old stomping grounds.
He spends years watching everything: Hong Kong action, Italian, French, blaxploitation. He develops opinions so specific that customers start coming in just to ask him what to watch. And so when he makes Reservoir Dogs, it's immediately obvious that he's a guy who's watched more films more carefully than almost anyone who's ever held a camera. Not because of school, but because of VHS tapes. And then gas is thrown on the fire by, of all places, film festivals. 1989, Steven Soderbergh's Sex, Lies, and Videotape premieres at Sundance, wins, makes $24 million. And the major studios are too busy running the franchise machine to notice. Miramax becomes the infrastructure, Sundance becomes the pipeline. You don't need a star, you don't need a franchise, you need a film that is undeniably good, and you need to get it to Park City, Utah in January. Robert Rodriguez funds El Mariachi by enrolling in paid medical research trials, $7,000. Kevin Smith maxes out 10 credit cards and shoots Clerks in the store where he actually works at night after closing. Both films get into Sundance, both get picked up. And then, while Wyatt Earp isn't even making back half of its $63 million, we get Pulp Fiction. It's an $8 million budget, which is enormous by indie standards, but almost invisible to studios. It makes $213 million worldwide. The side door just proved, yet again, it can generate the same numbers as the main entrance.
Is this serious gourmet shit on?
And the big studios actually take notice. They don't lock the side door. Instead, they try to buy it. And for the next years, they frantically create boutique indie divisions. Sony Pictures Classics, Paramount Classics, Fox Searchlight, they all start handing millions of dollars to the strange ones. The video store clerks, rule breakers, those type of guys, praying to catch lightning in a bottle twice. But back inside the main gate, the four mechanical inventions have been running so long and so hard that they've started to produce this weird, recognizable aesthetic. Let's call it plastic bloat. The pinnacle of this, some argue, is 1997's Batman and Robin. You got bat nipples and neon and a one-liner every 30 seconds. A film that feels kind of like a confused 2-hour toy commercial. Critics destroy it, audiences roll their eyes. The machine gets so good at replicating the surface features of films.
Well, I'm totally over, all right? Positively.
Me too, definitely.
Excuse me. I believe I'm the one who kicked Ivy's botanical butt. Yeah, that was me.
And then, 1999. We remember it as a bright pinnacle of pure creativity in film, but that's actually not the case. That's selective memory. It was actually something much, much more interesting. It was a moment where the industry was in a rare state of balance. Plastic bloat hitting theaters along with David Fincher and PTA. And the box office just kept growing despite TV, VHS, and bat nipples. A rare, beautiful, creative balance happening inside a commercially healthy system. It was like a pressure valve releasing. It was total chaos. Big movies, small movies, weird movies, and crowd pleasers. It's all just happening, and it's all funded by the studios. I mean, the list is incredible if you go dig deep enough. It's mind-blowing what came out in the span of this year. And yet, the suits at the studios still really have no idea how to sell the weird stuff. They're just cutting checks and flying blind and hoping for the best. For instance, Fight Club premieres at Venice and gets booed by the entire room. Famously, Edward Norton says that as everyone was booing, Brad Pitt turned to him and goes, "And that's the best movie I'm ever gonna be in." Then Fight Club opens in October and barely makes enough to cover the marketing spend. On paper, we call that a total failure. Similarly, Magnolia is just strange enough that, again, nobody knows how to sell it. It doesn't even pay back its marketing budget, and even Tom Cruise, who at this point is an absolute superstar at the height of his cruise powers, can't rescue it from box office failure.
I'm so sorry, baby. I am so sorry.
And then there's The Iron Giant. Warner Brothers spends serious money, like $50 million, and they drop it right into a peak summer theatrical slot, going head-to-head with Disney and Star Wars. And the film gets absolutely steamrolled. It makes a little over $30 million, and once you subtract the theater's cut and the advertising costs, estimates are that it loses Warner Brothers a cool $60 million. But it's a beloved classic. Even though, like most of the films in this revered 1999 list, it bombed at the theater. Which is super weird, right? Logically, if these movies got booed, underperformed, and or just plain got ignored, why didn't every single one of those directors get fired and replaced with people who promised not to lose $60 million every time they picked up a camera? Like, here we are, and they all go on to make legendary work for the big studios. It's almost like they got bailed out by something. If you've been paying attention, and I know you have, so thank you for that, you're probably confused, because this is the moment where, according to the pattern, your stomach should drop a little bit. Like, historically, this is the moment when the machine should collapse, and the entire system should force like a reset of itself. And you're right, something does come from the outside that takes everyone completely by surprise, but in this case, it actually just gives them 2 more decades to screw around and do whatever they want. I'm talking about these things.
DVD. See it. Buy it. Watch it once. Watch it twice. Spend hours watching extras.
These shiny little guys pour rocket fuel on something the execs call the long tail. If you think of opening weekend as a big bang of cash, the long tail is the ringing in your ears, the years of DVD sales and late-night cable reruns that just keep bringing money in. Fight Club barely makes its money back in theaters, but, and this is a direct quote from David Fincher, Fight Club sold 13 million DVDs. It paid for itself. That is the long tail. Even if a film studio didn't know how to market a beautiful movie theatrically, a few brave, or more likely bored people, rent it on a whim, and if it's a hidden gem, those people turn into sidewalk evangelists. They lend the disc to friends, they quote lines, they keep it alive one living room at a time. And by 2006, home revenue peaks at $16.3 billion. To put that in context, all of the theatrical box office that year was like $9 billion. So studios were technically making more money from the disc you bought at Best Buy than from the tickets sold in every theater in America combined. As crazy as it sounds, DVDs made failure almost impossible, which means studios could spend more on more films, on bigger stars, on longer shoots, and on more sequels. And to be fair, the early years of this era were genuinely excellent. Gladiator, Black Hawk Down, Memento, Minority Report, Catch Me If You Can, The Royal Tenenbaums, National Treasure, which should not work and absolutely does, and then, to cap it all off, in 2003, Gore Verbinski directs a film doomed to fail because it's based on a theme park ride, which sounds like the most cynical IP sell toys play imaginable, and it's somehow one of the most purely entertaining adventure films ever made. Johnny Depp almost gets fired because his character is so specific and strange, but the studio doesn't cut him, and they go on to make $654 million on a $140 million budget. And simultaneously, and don't forget this, Hollywood slips on a banana peel and stumbles into one of the greatest comedy runs in cinema history. You got Napoleon Dynamite, $400,000 budget, $46 million domestic. Anchorman, 40-Year-Old Virgin, Talladega Nights, Superbad, Mean Girls, Hot Rod.
Oh, shit.
Bridesmaids, The Hangover, and Tropic Thunder, just to name a few.
That ain't retarded. He was a goddamn war hero.
These films are specific, strange, and built around the personalities of Farrell Apatow, The Lonely Island. Even Edgar Wright arrives from Britain with Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead. And if one fails theatrically, well, the DVDs are always there to mop up the spare change. It's also important to mention that audiences aren't showing up to them because they recognize the IP or the franchise. They're showing up because someone funny made something funny and the word got out. And for a window of about 8 years, it produces an extraordinary body of work. But the machine eventually kills this too, because a joke is the one thing that really doesn't survive shipping. An explosion plays the same in Ohio and Shanghai, a punchline sort of dies at the border, and you're not supposed to sell a McDonald's toy of an angry elf. Then when the DVD money dries up, the comedy's insurance policy dies with it, so the specific, strange, personality-driven stuff quietly gets erased from the theatrical calendar. But there's always an upside, and this time, the system realizes nothing on Earth scales globally quite like a digital puppet.
The power of computers.
You can re-lip sync its mouth in 40 languages, you can swap the jokes per country. For instance, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so I'm sorry, but Zootopia, the news reporter, was actually changed based on the country you were watching the movie in. So China got a panda, we got a moose. But come on, we can't be mad because the weird ones bust in and they're not picky. They will use whatever side door was left ajar. DreamWorks actually gives Disney real competition, while Pixar was churning out a flawless run of masterpieces that print so much cash. Disney eventually just buys the whole darn company for over $7 billion. Then, in 2008, Iron Man launches something nobody ever expected. A serialized, interconnected cinematic universe. This era, to me, is a bridge. The Dark Knight, Inception, No Country for Old Men, Mad Max Fury Road, but the ratio tapers. Slots in the release calendar slowly skew towards franchise installments with bigger and bigger budgets. They made 5 total Pirates of the Caribbean movies in almost 15 years, and the final one grossed almost $800 million, but the American audience wasn't showing up, just a fraction of what it was for the first movie. And then you have Transformers and another Transformers and another and another and another. That's 7 films with an 8th on the way, but who's counting? Except in this case, the final film is considered to be a financial failure because it doesn't even make back its budget domestically. And to be honest, they did soak up the spare change internationally and make a ton of money and all of that, but I still think the trend is undeniable. People care less now than they did 5 movies ago. But credit where credit is due, franchise logic is working, the story is never over, the sequels keep showing up to theaters, and audiences do too, for the most part. Wider releases, bigger budgets, more test screenings, more sequels. The empire in full swing is a thing of beauty. And in the early 2000s, a little company named Netflix came up with something really cool. They would mail you any movie you wanted. You watch it, send it back, and they just mail you the next one on your list. It's a great idea, and unfortunately for Blockbuster, they were way too comfortable to take it seriously. Now, you have to understand at this point that Blockbuster Video is an absolute titan. It's the largest home video rental chain in the world, 59 million members, 9,000 stores, $6 billion in total annual revenue. And Netflix, this tiny company, approaches them and asks if they would acquire them for $50 million. And Blockbuster laughs them out of the room, which should sound familiar. In 1948, remember the studios fought the Paramount ruling? They lost. Then in '69, television was going to destroy movies. They lobbied Congress, and they lost. In '82, Jack Valenti told Congress to outlaw the VCR, and they lost. And then in 2000, Blockbuster laughs Netflix out of the room. And they didn't know it at the time, but again, they lost. By 2007, Netflix launches streaming, and 3 years later, Blockbuster files for bankruptcy.
Competition from the likes of Netflix and Redbox weighed on the retailer.
The company filed for bankruptcy 6 months ago, and now,
as you can see at this Easttown store, it just could not survive.
And now the studios all make the same mistake in slow motion. They spend 5 years feeding Netflix their content, their libraries, their mid-budget films and TV shows, and they help build Netflix as the most powerful distribution platform in entertainment history. In the beginning, the studios see the licensing fees from Netflix as basically like free money, which is pretty sweet, until Netflix gets 30 million subscribers and no longer needs the studios at all. So frantically, they all become streamers. Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, Apple TV Plus, HBO Max, Peacock. And when a global pandemic briefly locked everyone in their living rooms, the studios doubled down. And it becomes an arms race that accidentally trains their audience to do one thing: wait for it to hit streaming. Why drive to a theater when it'll be in your living room in 90 days? Why risk $20 on a ticket when you can sample it at home for free? And the streamers, desperate to justify subscriber growth, need optimized content. Not 10 great movies, 10,000 watchable ones. The MCU releases 23 films between 2008 and 2019. And then it releases another 16 in just 4 years. And the franchise machine, running on 20 years of momentum, finally tips into parity. The Marvels loses money, The Flash loses money, Ant-Man and the Wasp, nobody cares. Even Disney CEO Bob Iger eventually admits the problem.
And we increased our output tremendously to feed the streaming platforms. Too much, by the way.
Mistake.
Definite mistake.
And yet again, the machine becomes a parody of itself. Exactly the way Dr. Dolittle parodied the Roadshow epic, exactly the way Batman and Robin parodied the blockbuster, the formula keeps running after the thing that made it work has left the building. The audience isn't angry, they just stop caring. But, like always, here's what's also happening. Simultaneously inside the same years, Get Out, Hereditary, Parasite, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Lady Bird, The Witch, Uncut Gems, La La Land. The weird people are suddenly back, and they found a new side door, but this time, it's called A24. I didn't mean to make that rhyme, but I'm just gonna leave it in. And companies like A24 and Neon didn't invent this, they rediscovered it. Because yet again, the studios forgot that there is always an audience for the weird stuff. But A24 was still a gate. A cool gate.
Let's party.
An indie gate, a beautifully curated gate, but still, if you wanted through, they still had to say yes. And just to add to the chaos, a couple billion people download an app that serves you a free infinite scroll of 10-second videos, and suddenly the question shifts from why go to a theater to something more unsettling. More like, why watch 12 hours of Alfred Hitchcock films when you can just watch a 20-minute video essay with all the best parts already pulled out? Why experience a thing when someone's already distilled it for you? For the studios, the online landscape doesn't get rid of the four mechanisms, it just sort of shifts them subtly. For example, wide releases dissolve into niche releases for weird internet fandoms. Budgets get smaller, but also bigger at the same time, and test screenings become how many Instagram followers does your lead actress have? And sequels, well, I guess some things never change, right? So one day, the internet decided that maybe it didn't need a gate at all.
Yeah.
2026. We get 3 films in the first half of the year. Iron Lung, Obsession, and Back Rooms. Only $15 million in combined production costs, but $625 million at the box office. With 3 completely different distribution paths, each one helmed by a multi-hyphenate filmmaker, also doing things like editing, writing, acting, VFX, or even co-composing. And while these 3 movies and big successes like Project Hail Mary all have something to teach us, and I could spend hours talking about all of them, I want to highlight one particular movie of this bunch that really sums up, kind of poetically, everything we've been talking about. I understand this is not the movie that you want me to talk about, but I do think we need to take a closer look at Iron Lung. It's a $4 to $5 million budget, makes $51 million globally in theatrical sales. But most importantly, it is the perfect completion of something we talked about from 78 years ago that started near Century City, California. I skimmed over this earlier because you would have been bored to death.
My goodness, what a fuss you're making!
But now you've earned the full story. You see, back in 1948, the Supreme Court decided that the studios had a monopoly. Remember, they owned the entire pipeline? And the court forced them to give up one piece. And the studios chose to give up the theaters. This was called the Paramount Decree, and it's the reason you can go to one theater and watch movies from Universal and MGM and Fox. But here's what the Paramount ruling did not change. For 75 years after that ruling, if you wanted to make a film and have it seen by a theatrical audience, you still needed the system for something. Even if you did the whole creative side of filming yourself in your mom's basement, you still needed a distributor to get prints into theaters or the marketing infrastructure to reach the audience. Spielberg had Universal, Tarantino and Rodriguez had the Sundance to Miramax pipeline, the Safdies, Eggers, and Gerwigs had A24. Everyone needs a gatekeeper.
See what happens when you don't do a good job? You get punched.
But then, along comes a creator named Mark, known to 36 million subscribers as Markiplier, who built an empire playing indie video games and decided to finance a movie based on a claustrophobic submarine horror title called Iron Lung.
Confirmed beautifully. Oh!
So he ponies up the cash himself, completes the movie, but stop, that's not the interesting part. Here's the kicker. He skips A24, skips Neon, skips Lionsgate, and books 2,500 theaters anyway. He markets it to 36 million YouTube subscribers for free, and he makes a profit of roughly $45 million. And for the first time in the history of cinema, the pipeline is completely clear of the studios. Now, really hear what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that this is the best indie movie. I'm not saying it's the first indie movie or the first self-distributed movie or anything like that. What I'm saying is that this is the first movie that hits 2,500 screens and makes tens of millions of dollars without the studio touching a single stage of the process. The Dream Factory owned every step from camera to seat. The Paramount ruling broke one link in the chain. And the internet just broke the rest. And honestly, after all of this, after 100 years of the smartest suits money can buy, the pattern turns out to be kind of embarrassingly simple. Success, complacency, stagnation, panic, shockwave, invasion of the weird ones, repeat. When the machine is printing money, the studios lock the front door. And even when the machine breaks down, even when people cry, "Cinema is dead," the studios never open the gate themselves. Instead, some outside force kicks open a side door and hogties the guards. Could be a court ruling, could be a scary new machine. Whatever it is, amidst that chaos, in rush the weird ones who've been waiting outside the whole time. And the funny part, the Supreme Court technically reversed the Paramount decrees from 1948 in the year 2020. Which is why Sony immediately went out and bought a theater chain to try and rebuild their monopoly.
Sony Pictures Entertainment has acquired the chain of theaters under a new division called Sony Pictures Experience.
And you know what? Let them. Because for all of their backlots, high rises, and demographic trend analysis, they're still confused. When I went to see Backrooms, more than 2 weeks after it came out, I had to park the furthest away I've ever had to park. And I loved it. Not because it made tons of money, though that's cool. No, I loved it because the parking lot was full. And here's what the economics really can't explain. We just really love movies. Always have. Something about it. You take 100,000 photographs, you run them through light 24 frames a second. You add a symphony, maybe an illusion or two, some fashion even. And what you get is an experience you want to share with your kids, even if you don't have kids yet. And that feeling is what every financier and investor in studio has spent 100 years trying to own, and they can't. So on it goes. A masterpiece becomes a template, and that creates more amazing stories for a while. But then the template becomes stale, the oxygen leaves the room, people leave the theater. But out of that frustration, out of the collective creeping boredom, comes another generation of weird ones with weird ideas, finding a new side door. And a few of those ideas become masterpieces all over again. Wait for it.
It's still the same old story. A fight for love and glory. A case of do or die. The world will always welcome lovers as time goes by.
Whoa. So you guys do like movies. That's cool. Weird post-credit people. I made something for people who like movies and people who make movies. So there's a link below. Thank you guys for watching. I'm going to go this way now.